is Christian, and I belong to the most popular yet the least popular groups there are in entertainment and like in current era of entertainment. I am a comic book fan. I really like comic books. In case it doesn't show, in case you haven't noticed. To start off, did you know that the an American comic book narrative arc can be composed of about six? That's one, two, three, four, five, six of these. Up until 12. I've got 13 in here because 13 is a funny number in Spanish, but it's generally 6 to 12. And due to the format that Americans choose to print, the structure of the pages is standardized at around 20 to 24 pages of actual story. This allows for the read to be as comfortable as possible, and so that comic book companies can sell more stuff, of course, because at the core, as I'm going to be showing you later on, comics are still a business. It's something that you really can't get out of your head once you read as many and you have spent so much money in them for what you might think it's just something that you get for free in the newspaper. But something interesting about this, however, is that a lot of these individual issues within an arc can sort of be read and understood on its own. So let's say if I pull one of these, which I don't want to because it took so much effort to get them on there, and I'm still afraid that one of them might fall off. If it does fall off, it's going to be funny. So you're going to get something very funny out of this talk. And if they don't, I'm going to have to reevaluate my choice of tape, and I'm going to lose 13 comics. But yeah, if I took one of them from there, let's say it's issue number 3 of an arc, you'll probably understand with it what's going on within those 24 pages without having to resort necessarily to the previous 2. Unless you are really invested in exploring and not missing any actual details from the story, which I encourage you to do. Stories from comics are amazing. A 6-issue arc, I think reading it takes about an hour or so, which is about the length of this talk. So to give you sort of an in-depth example of how this works, I divided the stuff I want to talk about into 6 overarching issues for understanding design in relation to comic books. And the reason I did this is because while I was told by the organization that I had about a month or 2 to prepare for this, I sort of forgot, and I started working on it this morning. So let's see how that pans out. I wanted to be not along for the ride, not alone for the ride. I interviewed actually a UX designer that does lettering for Marvel and DC. However, the big fire corrupted that file, and I am very sorry about that. You didn't have to know it, but at some point in the future, if you keep up with me and the work that I do, I will post that interview later on, because I got so much from it, and so many, so much stuff that I already knew from my experience with comics. He has done it like 10 times more. So yeah, I want you to know that that's something that exists out there, a designer that actually implements their work into comics, like one feeds the other. He's a letterer, but I'll explain that later. The work of comics, as vital as writing and drawing can be, it's, I don't know how much work you think goes into writing and publishing a comic book, unless you come from like Tumblr or 4chan, which those sort of take very, very little time. However, print comic does take a lot of work, does take a lot of editorial work, writing, revisions, Essentially a design process, a design thinking process. Um, but before we go on about it and I start actually talking about what you came to hear me say, a bit of a disclaimer. I'm gonna geek out a lot about comic books over the next few minutes, and by that I mean probably a lot, because I could spend an entire hour just recommending you comics. Um, so the best way for me to do that is, that actually leaves you with something to apply to your daily life, is by dissecting the hell out of my favorite reads, like some of my favorite reads and art from comic books that I really enjoy. So it's sort of a win-win situation, or a trade offer, if you will. You receive knowledge, I get to talk about comic books a lot. You take something home, All right, okay. We are up for it. Oh, wait. Finally, this talk will focus a lot on a few key points of the relationship between comic books and design specifically, like those two mediums. But as long as you follow the narrative of this comic book arc, as we're gonna start calling it right now, because that sounds really cool. I hope that you can find a way to reflect and direct the passion that I have for comics to your own likings and your own passions, because that's sort of what I want you to take, home after this is over. Reflect on how your passion impacts your own career. So comic is my passion, and I'm going to be talking about that. So this sort of counts as an issue 0, if you want to call it that. Issue number 1 is sort of an introduction to the world that you're going to be living for the remainder of your experience. So I guess that what I'm doing here, by giving you some context and a small taste of what's to come, works and lands perfectly within the boundaries of the issue number 1, which is that comics are really cool. I think that just like their big brothers in literature, they can transport you to realities and adventures that can make you feel so many things. They can make you smile, cry, laugh out loud, gasp in surprise, and even make you angry at some point. And not just because some comic makes you feel angry due to the narrative, but only because, just like this one you're seeing right now, despite being a really good movie, is a terrible, terrible, terrible comic book. But still, comics are a very unique experience, and they can give you the best stories through the best way to guide you through one, which are art and writing. So, how else can I continue after calling John Wick a terrible comic? That's pretty much all I got. I'm sorry. Like, talk's over. Okay, no, not really. I'm kidding. However, comics are also the least, despite the popularity of the characters that you see, inundating everything in media right now. Like, you have series based on comic books, movies, you got games, you got cartoons. Comic books, like by themselves, like this piece of media that once cost only 10 US cents, they're a lot more expensive now. One of these actually goes by like $2 million. This one's fake. This one's like a replica because it came with a box of something. Whoops, sorry, Soups. That's disrespectful to Superman. I'm sorry if you're a Superman fan. If you like Superman, I'm gonna pick that up later. Comic book sales are not doing great. They're not doing great at all. It's kind of a bummer. Stories are really cool. But comics have a way of still, even if you don't, which I will assume that you don't really read comic books that much. Maybe you got them at a book fair, or somebody gave them to you, or you just found like snippets of some cool stuff online. But they do still have a way to crawl under your skin and being part of your life without you really even noticing it. I know very few people that read comic books. I know even less people that are designers and read comic books. However, I do know some designers like Fabio Emilia and Bonnie Colville-Clyde, which I will mention later on. that have a special title, comic books or superheroes in one way or some form or another. And there's no surprise there, really. Comics are pretty much everywhere these days. They're in our movies, they're in our toys, they're in our memes. Like what was this meme? Oh, Hello Peter. Hello Peter. That was like a month ago when the Spider-Man trailer dropped out. Yeah, there's memes of comics every place, and Spider-Man's just a goldmine for it. And some of the most recognizable faces and iconic figures in media come from the pages of what once cost 10 UN cents. Actually, it's pretty good that I was already planning to pick this up. Like, no, I wasn't planning on it to fall first, but Action Comics #1, like I said, it goes now for about 2 million. Like I think it's more expensive now. Like one of these went for at auction for like a lot of money. But back in 1939, those were 10 US cents, cost of a soda, maybe. I don't know what soda costs like. But 9 years later, we can see the influence of it pretty much everywhere. And as you can see, comics are rooted in a lot of what we see. And at this point, if it suddenly vanished, if comics, just went away and just didn't exist anymore, ignore that. Just imagine this isn't here. It would still leave like a big hole in your line of sight, right? Like if I say just like, hey, this doesn't exist. So what's there? Just door, right? Just a closet door. But if you didn't think I was talking about comics or, doing that, making you imagine stuff like this, you could think that I'm still talking about design as well. Because, I don't know if you've noticed, but everything's designed. Everything's designed. And there are several aspects of comic books and design that overlap, which is in part the reason that I'm talking to you right now. The other ones that I didn't really have anything better to do with, my day. Again, I'm kidding. Design is a discipline that unites us all, especially those of us who are professionals in design. But whether you chose it as a career or not, you can still know that design can take many forms. From, the chair I'm sitting in right now, or you could be sitting in right now, to that Adobe XD file or that Excel spreadsheet that just crashed in the middle of, a life-threatening moment when you had to deliver something, or just to the beautiful, colorful pages of a graphic novel. After all of this, we're just trying to do one thing, right? We're just trying to tell stories. We're trying to find a way to make people's life a lot easier. Maybe just visually through design, through graphic design, or through comic books, or practically by industrial designs and scientific achievements. Design is just there, just everywhere. It's like, I don't know, ticks, but good. We might have chosen, like those of us who are in the professional field, we might have chosen this discipline as our career for a large number of reasons. And one of them, that could be that you're passionate about it, right? You could be passionate about your career. That's amazing, that's based, that's the dream, right? Or one of them overshadows the other, which is admittedly less based. Or like in my case, and I wish I knew more people that could tell me that this is something that they do, they find a way to let passion shape their career, and they allow it to give it a completely different light. And I say this because while I love design, and design is at the core of a lot of what I do, I wouldn't be the designer that I am, and I wouldn't have the knowledge that I am, and I couldn't be sharing what I do without being a comic book fan first. And the math is pretty solid on that too. I've been a graphic designer for about 8 years. I've been a UX for 5. But I've been reading comics a lot of that time, almost, 3 times that time. Uh, when something has brought you joy for that amount of time, it's quite difficult to not let it shape the way that you see the world around you. And I can talk about design topics like this with the same energy that I can discuss the Marvel Multiverse. Most of you, I think, are seeing the Marvel show What If. That is a very convoluted plot in the comic books, and I know a lot of it, and I know a lot from usability testing as well, and I can discuss them both with the same energy, or I can think of the absurdity of the DC Comics Speed Force, what makes the Flash run fast. The same way that I can just refer to you to patterns and colors and button sizes and whatever it is that you nerds talk about. If you stick around, I'll tell you another story, about what was the pivotal moment that allowed me to unite these two worlds. I'm just going to call them worlds because it sounds cool. Again, these two worlds at its core. But first, it's time for me to tell you what parts of both worlds are the easiest to draw parallels for, because I don't want you to get bored and you came here to learn, which I don't know why you're doing that, because I'm not a teacher. But yeah, that makes sense. We'll work backwards as much as I can follow my own narrative line. From here to here, like in Memento, it goes backwards. I don't know if is that a spoiler? Well, sorry that I spoiled a 20-year-old movie. But yeah, let's talk about the first parallel that we could draw from, which is visual storytelling, right? It should be that, right? Like visual storytelling, end of story, end of talk. I planned on finishing here at some point while preparing this talk because I made it this morning. But okay. I'm gonna list you a few items, okay? And you try to tell me when I'm only talking about comic books or only talking about design. Got it? Okay. How about iconography, visual iconography and its effects, the reader participation between the panels or frames, word picture dynamics, or the psychology of line styles and color, or time and motion. Is it just me? Like, am I crazy for feeling like these things are related only because I've been working on design for so long that I can just make strawman arguments like this and getting away with it? Yes, I can. Yes, I absolutely can. An article from UX Booth. I don't know if you guys remember UX Booth back in the days of the 2012 happy internet. I found something that said that taking together all the elements of comic book artistry create something that's called a flow. And you can call somebody who's really good at this a master of flow. That's what it looks like. Masters of flow can make readers' eyes dance across the page, even in very unconventional directions. Because the thing is, like, on their own, eyes want to travel in a downward slanting direction, from like here to there. Ad magazines, right? Ad magazines. I don't know. These are not that popular in Latin America anymore because magazines are not popular at all anymore. But they have V-shaped, structures and layouts for that same reason. Look. Yep. Look. Jesus, shoo. Okay. Some people just get comfortable, very, very comfortable with this kind of stuff. I lost my concentration. I'm sorry. But that's only good for scanning. Visual, V-shaped structures for ad magazines. Those are made just for scanning. And while it's a common heuristic, according to the word of Jacob Nielsen, that people don't read pages, but they just scan them. That's kind of an oversimplification, but let's roll with it. readers have been trained to skim content, skip it, like nothing. But mostly it's due to the fact that most of that content is awful, fluffy, poorly prepared, and terribly placed. I don't know if you saw the ad I just ran. Like, I don't even remember what it was about, and I've been looking at that picture for weeks. I mean, since this morning. I started working on it this morning. That means that designers and comic book artists shouldn't want readers to scan. We want them to digest. We want them to understand. We want them to listen with their eyes. Okay, I know how that sounds. Just bear with me. Well, there are very few rules in comics. One is that the Western reader's eye just always starts at the top corner left of the page. The eyes just move that fast. Okay, like the green arrow, just follow the green arrow, and the V shape of this and that. Yeah, that happens with our eyes just because we're trying to find a place to start, because we want to consume information still, even though we at some point just skim the content and just skip it. But that's why most of these comic book pages, if you could rip out one, which I don't want to, I definitely don't want to, but I also want to, because a lot of these things are just so, a lot of these are really good stories, and they have really, really cool art that I think you should see. But I'm very scared that if I rip one of them, they all will fall. So instead of that, let me introduce you to the work of J.H. Williams III. He's a comic book artist, illustrator that seems to just be very, you can see that he sort of threw the formula out. He threw it out the window, and you could think that everything I said about the shapes and all that, it means nothing. But if you look at it, you can start seeing that the structure of how humans read is still pretty much there. And it shows how, as a designer or an artist or both, you can take design principles. God damn, that guy's so good. So good. The structure is still there. You can still read from, top to bottom, left to right, because we're all Western readers, and that's the way we read. And he can still take those designs and reapply them in a way that it looks creatively, rich, but it doesn't mess the message up. And that's kind of genius, once you start delving a little more into more of his work, and you just read an entire comic book where he drew everything, like the layouts, the illustration. He doesn't color, but he doesn't need to. Any artist, any designer should strive for that kind of balance and that kind of structure. A structure that doesn't compromise or sacrifice your creative endeavors. So indeed, a designer has to guide their users the same way an illustrator or a letterer do with their readers. Taking this into a real-world comparison, talking about UI design, when we want users, or we need users to interact with one particular element, we make it stand out, to be more visible, eye-catching. Adding, like a button to add to cart, or a button to sign up, a call to action, if you may, right? Each piece of that design, each piece of that ergonomy, and the visuals of the interface are thought of in order to influence users' choices so they can navigate through your product seamlessly, any way they want, or more importantly, any way they need to. People aren't really, or you could say that, people just don't read digital products, but they do look at the pages. Humans are very visual animals. They're visual animals first. and images are often the first thing we notice in a page, while words and all the other stuff, the other fluff, adds an extra layer of abstraction that your brain sort of has to decode. But there's a benefit to this. People respond very well to comics because they are different and they're very visual, and it makes them very powerful communication tools as they attract a lot more people rather than repel them. And one thing that I can say for sure while you're hearing to me talk is that I've been mentioning how I want to show you some of these comics, and I bet a lot of you would prefer to just read them. Like if this was like an on-site conversation, I would probably just bring these comics and lay them on a table, and then you could look at them. You would want to look at them. You will feel drawn to them, and then you will probably steal them because that happened once. And that's why comic book collectors sometimes are very squirmish about sharing their stuff. But no, I don't think you're going to steal it. I don't think you're going to steal it. I think you're a very nice guy or girl or MB. Steve would be proud of you. Kevin Chang wrote a very interesting book. He's a design manager at Yahoo, and he wrote a book called See What I Mean, in which he says that comics are like a Trojan horse for information. The format of comic creates a natural gravitation towards them, which is what I just said, but more professional. They have a very low barrier, they're quick to read, and they are very entertaining. Providing very useful information in a comic, it's almost unfair to some readers because, some humor, some lighthearted nature of most comics lower their readers' defenses. And I think that's something that you can implement into design. If you're a designer, I don't mean make a clown app or a clown website or just, color everywhere here and there, because that's not how UI design's pattern works these days. But it's fair to say that comics should be considered for communicating any message. At times, a video, a document, or a prototype may be more appropriate, but you should always at least consider the medium. You should at least think that that there's something of worth to it. People have used comics to explain all sorts of topics. In journalism, actually, Dan Archer has collected a list of comic journalists, people who are journalists but document their stories in comic form. Sometimes they're interactive because the new technologies just demand it at this point. Sometimes they're very short, like comic strips, like political comics of the sort. There's a reason why they're very effective, even though a lot of them are very, very bad. But sometimes there are entire graphic novels about it. And here's the one that I want to recommend you at this point, because it's not here, and I'm not gonna go look for it. But it's called Mouse. I don't know if you've heard of Mouse. It's a Chronicle reporter and writer, Art Spiegelman. He documented the stories of his father during the era of the Holocaust. I think it's a very great read, and you should give it a look as soon as you can. I could have sworn I brought it up, but I didn't, so I apologize for that. So there you go. One of the best examples of what I can think of in relation to how comics tell a story that's more digestible for us is this comic actually by XKCD. I'm pretty sure you've heard of XKCD before, and I'm pretty sure you've read, or not read, a lot of stuff online about making passwords safe and how that works. I don't really. I mean, I consider myself a person that has very safe passwords, but I don't understand jack about it, or at least I never did until I saw this. And if you still think that making safe passwords is complicated, well, there are password managers out there. I don't know what I can do for you. That in the end seems pretty clear with me, but okay. Comics can do another interesting thing that you can add yourself to your designer bat belt. I don't have a bat belt because I don't like, nobody pays me anymore. But as a tool that you can add to your designer set of skills, it's how you can influence your reader to keep them hooked to your story. You can see the last panel of the last page, telling something but not everything, just awaiting for us to wonder a lot more about what will go on, like what's next for these characters that have followed for at least 20 pages. So that's the reason why cliffhangers exists. And the way that people use that in product design, UI design, advertisement, and well, not industrial design because most of those are finished. There's a way that products and companies make us addicted to this stuff. Sites like Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or other very, very wholesome websites, they want you to keep you engaged. They want you to find the next post, the next picture, the next very, very interesting and very familiar piece of content. They want you to scroll indefinitely. They want you to keep finding pages and pages and infinite scrolling and never goes away. But yeah, if you want to continue with me working, backwards to how the technical aspect of this starts to take shape into a more of a, real, taken form of, implementation of design in comics. Let's delve into issue number 3, which is, Soul Squares, baby. Funnily enough, that comic book character, his name is Squarehead, and he's dumb. He's very, very dumb. He's a very dumb character, but it's a classic. I think it's British, if I remember correctly. But okay, it's all squares, right? We often joke that designers, particularly web and UX designers, a good part of our job is just to move squares. And we all know there's a little bit of truth in that. Again, that's an oversimplification, but again, let's roll with it. We're trying to have some fun here. Let's take the path of least resistance for another couple of minutes because I'm trying to have fun here. A very common starting point when you want to associate comic books and design, it's that they both start from very simple squares. Wireframing, right? You know wireframing? Yeah, we do this a lot, like product designers. We work on this a lot. We see a lot of squares, You would think that seeing a lot of squares, you don't really care more for comics, given that it's even more squares, right? But let's take a look. Let's take a bit of a closer look at this shopping cart and this comic book page. If we strip them down to their skeletons, we see that they share a very similar base. And at its core, we can see not just one, but 2 comic book techniques at work, which are paneling and proximity. So the thing about paneling, generally speaking, a comic's panels and the frames act as a sort of mini corral for the eye. Readers process each panel individually, right? Each frame individually. We also know that everything inside that panel takes place at the same space and time, generally, unless you get into quantum stuff, comic related content. Everything within a panel is also related to each other, but it doesn't have to be like just characters. It could be a character with random objects on a scene. And that's paneling. And proximity is a lot more easy to fathom. Things close to each other seem more related than things spread apart. Simple as that. I just wanted to really publish this panel because I never get tired of it, ever. I don't even know where it's from. I found it as random panels, some compilations that you find online. I'm trying to find where this is from. I've tried to look at it for like years, and there's still nothing. So if anyone in chat has a way for me to find out what this is, please let me know. But with those concepts in mind, notice how each of these items has its own box, its own panel, separating it from each other. And by scanning naturally, you want your user to review everything they did in order to finish their purchase without a doubt. And that is what they just did. And if we take a look at this comic book page from Daredevil number 20 from Chip Zdarsky, we can say the same base structure and succession as to where your eyes are going to follow. And the progression as you read towards the end of the page, what do you see, right? What's there? What caught your eye the most? I'm going to play that again, not only because you still need to see exactly what it is that I mean by the sequence of panels, but also because this story arc, I'm going to recommend you some comics at the end, but this Daredevil story arc, it's so good. It's so objectively amazing. Like the writing, the art, the lettering, the pacing of the story, it's so great. It's over now, so I can recommend it to you. You can recommend I can recommend to you that you read it. It's about, 30 issues or so, separated into 5 or 6 smaller arcs, but they, look at some big picture stuff. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself about recommending you comic books, but go read Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. Do it. Please do it. Sorry, I get a little heated up and it's warm in here. There's not really much else, to get to at this point on the technical aspect, unless we want to get started on a full wireframing workshop, which isn't my job, and I don't really know how to convey it properly because I have a very short attention span and I am terrible at teaching. But it's still a good indication to leave it at that, right? However, if you think about it in combination with the richer aspects of visual storytelling, there's a compelling argument that it's one part of the whole pie. You could apply this comparison and still say that that's the extent of my improvement as a designer through comic books and through the understanding of comic books. But still, that can't be it, right? We still have some time to discuss something else, right? We're not going to talk about picnics or politics. We're going to continue talking about comic books for a while. What if we don't just look at the design process? What if we don't look at the final product of comic books and the storytelling alone, but we take a smaller dive into the business side of it? Yay, let's talk business. Please, no. But we have to, okay? We need to dissect some aspects of that that can be helpful to identify exactly what to do as a designer, as a professional, and what to avoid all through that. And the reason that I'm prefacing this, we gotta delve a little bit into issue number 4, which is know thy industry, know thy customer. Let's delve into that. There's some objective data here that I could show you in regards to this issue, just to tell you how the design industry has been trying to keep up with the times while the comic book industry isn't really doing that. And I can draw general parallels between the design and comic books industry's path in regards to, adapting to that new world of technology. But I need to talk to this, and I want to talk to you for the rest of this talk in a little bit more of a personal matter, because this is something that really matters to me, and the fact that it's not being uh, treated properly makes me very angry. So I'm gonna be talking from a very personal lens, and I'll try to convey my thoughts in the least this is just me sort of perspective. So it's time to understand a little bit about the machinery required to make all of this inspiration happen. What's behind the curtain? How can design as a discipline learn or evolve based on what other parallel disciplines are doing as well? And like I said at the very, very beginning, comics are very rooted up in everything we see in pop culture specifically. There's no shortage of comic book related content, nearly any current form of entertainment. Even in literature, like novels, there are Marvel novels from, I think, Batman, Doctor Strange, some Spider-Man, Iron Man ones. American Gods was born as a novel, and then it, delved into a comic book and then a TV show. So there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it. And the biggest movie in franchise in history was built on the foundation of those classic characters. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. I'm talking about some of the most recognizable faces on the planet. Yet that doesn't necessarily mean or translate into the comics industry thriving. And I don't know why. It doesn't make much sense, does it? Like you have, like just imagine Pokemon. Imagine Pokemon like Pokemon comic books or Pokemon manga, which manga is something that's very popular in Japan and it's never going away. And it's probably even thriving even more because of the practices of Western literature, Eastern literature that's very different from the one that we know. Manga is just a whole beast that I could spend hours not talking about it because I know nothing about it. But comic books are a cycling industry, and right now that cycle is going downwards. With the top books, the top comic books sell less than 100,000 copies, and if you think that's still a lot, it sort of is, but bear in mind that the X-Men #1 from 1992 sold 2 million copies, like the first issue alone. And they didn't really go down from a million after, the #1 came along, and the numbers dwindled just a lot later in time for the X-Men, which are a very, very popular comic book property. Some of these can be pinned on an array of factors, but the main suspect here, surprisingly, is the comic book industry itself. One of the reasons that the Western comic book industry is on thin ice, particularly in recent years, is that these big companies, Marvel, DC, Image Comic, seem to have lost touch with their real audience. And I did this, not saying that it was me, but it is me. It is me. It's people that are very accustomed to their characters evolving in a more organic way. So Marvel specifically it's significantly guiltier of doing this than everyone else, and I love Marvel. That's why I'm very hard about this. But the way and the reason I'm talking about all of this, that may seem like it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things, or that it doesn't, reflect how it's making me or not making me better at design, talking about comics. But, passion is not without its criticisms. Marvel just doesn't listen to their audience. They're trying to, appeal to a proto audience, like a projected audience, which isn't really bad unless, when you don't alienate your current audience, you can still look for new ones, which is, the essence of being a business. But that rough patch that the comic book industry is going through might feel similar to the way that we can see a lot of design practices struggle to stay relevant after, a few technologies, new ones come along every year and then again. Remember what was the one, like neomorphism, like the one that feels like a phantom is pushing a button out of the interface. That was cool, but it's gone. It's gone. It's niche now. So it can happen to another industries as well. It's particularly design, because everything is just adapting to everything so fast. So yeah, as new technologies and innovation become more easily accessible, yeah, we need to. I need to take a look at why comics are failing, and that's because digital is business. Business is booming, but it's still waiting for the comic books. So comic books must deliver on business outcomes, right? The same way that design does. Each one of these worlds has a lot of challenges to overcome to avoid stagnation. However, notwithstanding the challenges that each industry faces individually, some of the plateaus that they're facing come from the same places. And understanding as many as we can, there's a way to move those plateaus. And taking some knowledge again from Kevin Chang's book, See What I Mean, just as there are very different ways to present comics, there are ways to make and design products. You will encounter different types of resistance depending on who you're trying to cater to. That means that you need to pay very close attention to find the true audience for your work. Because once you go through the effort of finding it, your products, your designs will not only be more likely to be seen, but they will be more likely to be remembered. And that means your business is going to make more money. So I don't think anybody at Marvel is listening or hearing this at all, but yeah, you can still hear me. You can still listen to what I mean. And what I mean is listen to your audience, find your real audience, and be very wary of how those audiences evolve without radically changing, because attitudes don't change from one day to the other. It takes time. And rushing into some decisions just because you think that the audience will like it because it's new and that's it, it's not going to work. It's not going to be what you're expecting. Most times that's going to fail, and you need to go back to the drawing board after that. So the way that knowing and understanding this industry background and why it helps me improve upon my professional path as a designer is by making me aware of how all these overlaps between these two worlds means that some of the same industry risks can be shared. And by understanding those, they can be more easily fixed or even avoided altogether. And that is business. At this point, if you want to make a Megazord, the robot from the Power Rangers. Power Rangers are a comic book now. They're thriving as a comic book right now, and I recommend, just go read it. Go Power Rangers from number 1 to number 32. That's a great read, and it's made mostly illustrated by a good friend of mine, like a pen pal or parcel. No, it's not a parcel friend, but a friend, Dan Mora. He's really good. He's really good at his work, and there's so much that he does that's amazing. So go read the Power Rangers comics, because there's a lot of love and a lot of theme put into it that it's very eye-catching and very memorable to see it grow. So yeah, Megazord, Voltron, some sort of bootleg Transformers. You have the understanding of the goal at the feet, the storytelling guides at the other feet, the layouts on the pretty squares, and the comic book business guide on what not to do as the head. And now we need to get into the core of what makes it work together. And make sense of the work that you want to accomplish. So for that, let's jump into issue number 5, which is inspiration. And I don't have a fancy graphics for it because my computer crashed and it didn't render the transition, but it's still inspiration, and how you can apply it. And having taken a good look at J.H. Williams' work on illustration and layouts, we can say that as designers, we have our own processes, right? Our own sorts of rituals to help us kickstart our creative juices. What helps me get going every time I go into a new design project or need some form of creative inspiration to display my ideas, I turn to comics to get a grasp of how I can follow the rules and then break some of them. And I still want to bring back J.H. Williams into this because his work is just look at it again. It's so pretty, really, really pretty. But as much as you can say that it's important to know that while I've been talking about comic books all this time, you can still see a lot of design in everything that surrounds you. And I'm pretty sure that after listening to me for this long, if you haven't left, which thank you, I know it's not easy to listen to me. If you're still here, this world of comics may still not be for you. And it may sound weird that I'm trying to, tell you that this isn't for everyone. But, I don't think I need to tell you. Even if it is because I'm acting like a maniac. And fans can get a little toxic and gatekeepery about their passions, particularly entertainment. Sonic fans are not to be messed with. I'm trying to open those gates widely still because I would love for people to get to know more about these stories, about what, the limits of the imagination just aren't a monopoly of written literature alone. The industry needs people, creatives, readers, people that can spend money on making stuff. The industry is going to go broke, like intellectually, morally, and economically. So let's talk about what comics can do for you, shall we? Do you know what the simplest parallel can be that you can draw between both worlds is? Storyboards. Huh? How about those? You like storyboards, right? Maybe you even don't know that you're using them at some point, right? Storyboards are a fantastic starting point to get people on board with your ideas. If you're maybe finding it difficult for a manager to get on the same page as you, but we flash back to a few issues ago, and we remember that people are keen to engage with comics because they show people, not just words. And comics allow us to use body language, facial expressions, and a whole host of visual cues and clues to share information and build empathy. An example at hand, very actually quite smart, a little bit actually, yeah. It's a former eBay designer made a strip about the shopping cart experience. Let me see actually if I can find it for you, because that is actually something pretty cool, really, actually. Yes, a little bit. Let's see. So much stuff, so much research here. All right, there we go. Here we go. Let me just shift it here. And all right. We're gonna have a little bit of a commercial break. Please don't go away. I'm gonna still continue talking to you. It's just that I need to set something up here that I don't know how to do it yet. So while I do that, let's still talk about comics and some stuff that I can actually recommend to you. I don't know if you've ever heard of Batman Arkham Asylum. It's one of the greatest Batman stories that you can find from Batman. I think it's a very self-contained story, and that is very useful for a lot of people that don't read a lot of comic books. Because it still has all of what you expect from comics without really being very invasive about it, and the art is very jarring. Like the art is very, very scary and creepy. Uh, but that, in a very good form, in a very useful way for you to not get lost and understand exactly what you like, where you are in terms of the story. So let's take a look at the eBay cart process. I wouldn't be surprised if you've seen this before. Um, we have an artist here that actually did a great job of showing the process of the whole end of a journey, right? The whole journey of a user while they are in the eBay app, and what their mood is at the time of making a purchase decision. You don't have to be J.H. Williams or Alex Ross or Dan Mora or Jack Kirby to trust the limits of your aesthetic talent, because you still understand what you see here. And basic shapes, a lot of basic shapes still can convey a lot of information. You know, maybe this, most people don't even know that this is how you can map a user journey. You can get people on your side with this. The same goes, for example, an example I found in See What I Mean, in which Alexa Andrzejewski, that's a mouthful of a last name, but she was very good as well. And she, like this that you see here, this was the first step of her getting ideas and pitch-ins for her startup. You know, this was step one for her. And I think that's really good. You'll get a call from DC Comics in no time if you walk down this path. Like just saying, you need to be ready for that. You know, you need to be ready to avoid avoid the fear of people not being convinced by little drawings, because little drawings do make a difference. You know, embrace the comics, embrace them, I say. You know. And one additional resource that I found, which I think is very neat, at showing the enjoyment and the best attempt to get the most out of both worlds. It's a project by Bonnie Colville Hyde called, funnily enough, UX Comics. Focusing on selling a process rather than an outcome, Bonnie believes there's something called death by documentation. In which, you know, based on the very real idea that people get bored very easily, like anyone who's left at this point, that applies to teams and clients alike, you know. And I may be, and I am absolutely completely biased, but I dare you to imagine that these things are at your table. I'm coming back to this because this is still a good example. And I knew there was a reason that I came up with it this morning when I started talking, you know, working on this talk. I am very biased about it, but I dare you to imagine a comic book like all of this on your house table, your dining room table, and try to not picture yourself. I dare you. Try to not picture yourself getting drawn to it. No pun intended. Especially if you don't have to pay anything to get it. Like the best, some of the greatest entries in comic books are free. You know, there's a free comic book day, usually in May. That rhymed. I wasn't planning that at all. Get into comics however way you like, or however way you think it's best for you to retain that information, and where it's easy for you to get them online. ComiXology has opened up a lot of legal ways to engage with comic books. So yeah, I would pretty much recommend you that you look into that. You look into comics. Comics can bring so much inspiration to you in ways that I cannot convey as well as I wish I could. because I'm gonna tell you a story right now. I'm gonna wrap up with this. If you're looking for something more tangible, or if you think that I'm, making up some nonsense, uh, that's the extent of what I can do to show you how to improve your design experience through the logical lenses of research and admittedly some very stretchy parallels. But that may be a little more correlated than causated. But the final issue of this comic, like issue number 6, the one that will wrap it all up, will be probably the origin, of me having that desire to inject my nerdy, rambly, kindly unique, as we all have perspectives of my hobby into the work that I do and the work that I love. So picture this, okay? For issue number 6, the final issue, it gets real. There's a hobby that you like. Picture mine, comics, or picture yours. Maybe you're into sports. Maybe you're into movies. Maybe you're into some of the other stuff that I was showing you earlier, wholesome content, whatever it is. It's something that a lot of people like, but it's not something that a lot of people understand. You have nearly no way to explain why it is so enticing to you and why it brings you so much joy. At some point, you might not even care anymore, right? You might not think that this is something that you can bring into your own world and make, something useful for somebody that's other than yourself, because your hobbies are useful to you. Your passions are very useful to yourself because they, allow you to disconnect for a little bit from what you don't like about the world, which for some of you might be a lot. But I'm going to tell you a story, and I did not prepare this. I didn't script this part because it's still to the core of my heart, But when I was like 6 or 7 years old, I was moving a lot with my mom. I didn't understand why at the time, but we were, jumping from space to space. And at one of those jumping of spaces, one of my aunts brought me a comic book. I don't have it because I didn't have object permanence at 7, at the oldest. They were some Spider-Man and Iron Man books that were in English. I didn't know a word of English at the time. She just brought them for me. She just told me that just some guy at her work, his kid lived in the United States and he sent them and he said I didn't want them. And then, how parents get with stuff that their kids don't want anymore. They just want to get rid of it if they don't like it themselves. So that was my start, in a way, into the world of superhero comic books. Because at some point before, there was this, being Latin American, you find a lot of comic books, right? You find Condorito, you find Mafalda, the ones you mentioned at the beginning of the talk, mainly because of your parents. But that was my experience at first. I found Iron Man and Spider-Man comic books, and the color, the emotion in the drawings, the kapows, the schnitz, the thwips of Spider-Man, they really spoke to me, and I could understand everything from it, even without knowing a word of English. Later on, I learned, and I got a lot more into stories. Then I got to see a lot of cartoons and other stuff like that. But what I got from it, what I got at the core of it, was that somebody gave me some comic books at a point that I didn't know that I needed them to fuel what I enjoyed, to fuel my desire to help people, to communicate better with them, to try to make stuff accessible at some point. Because I wondered a lot, why is there not as many comic books in Spanish? Why are people just not wanting to read this stuff? Why do people just don't want to find a way to help each other with the stuff that they can do? And that's at my core, my desire to help people through accessibility in design comes a lot from the way that I had to learn by myself what it is to get inspired by comics and work as a designer. And I could extend this story a lot more, but I don't think we need to get a lot deeper into that, especially because it's been more than an hour already. And I apologize that I overstayed my welcome. It is warming here, so I think I've been talking for quite a bit of time. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, this chance to talk to you guys about what I like. And I hope I've motivated you to realize that some of the stuff that you like can still influence your work.